Krishna. Welcome back. I think last week I did not do a stream, so happy to do one now. We are starting chapter 10 today. We are past the halfway point at live stream number 75. I wonder how many it'll take to finish all 18 chapters. Very interesting, I think. Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis everywhere. You can join me or not while I glorify and invoke the Supreme. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. First, let's read these 3 verses in H.D. Goswami's literal translation. He has made it into a cluster with the next cluster ending on verse 7. We'll see about that next time. Man, dirty case. See if I can't wash this. Here we go. Chapter 10, verse 1 through 3. The Lord said, "Yet again, mighty armed, hear my supreme word. Desiring your good, for you are loved, I shall speak to you. Neither hosts of gods nor great sages know my origin. For I am wholly the source of gods and great sages, one who knows me as unborn and beginningless. The great Lord of worlds is unconfused among mortals and is freed from all sins." That's it. Pretty straightforward 3 verses, I think. In Prabhupada's Gita, there is some special things in the purports, I think, that we'll talk about. So let's get to it. Here is verse 1. This chapter is called The Opulence of the Absolute. So it's a perfect continuation of chapter 9, where Krishna is still sharing some confidential personal secrets of His Majesty. Specifically about opulence and the 6 opulences. Anyway, here we go. Verse 1. The Supreme Lord said, "My dear friend, mighty armed Arjuna, listen again to my supreme word, which I shall impart to you for your benefit and which will give you great joy." And my notes were wrong. Although one thing, at the very last sentence of the purport, I'll read right now. Quote, "The Lord clearly tells Arjuna that because he is very dear to him, for his benefit, such discourses are taking place." Unquote. So that, what Prabhupada said, matches also what H.D. Goswami literally translated this verse as. So if you take that sentence, the 2 different verse translations, you got it. You got this verse. Pretty small purport here. And yeah, Prabhupada begins by explaining the 6 opulences, specifically referring to the Sanskrit word paramam, which he literally translates as supreme. In the verse, it means supreme information, my supreme word. And now we're getting into more confidential knowledge. His specific opulences. That's what we're doing now in chapter 10. Why? Once again, that is where it's a continuation of the previous chapter. It's to establish devotion in firm conviction. So, how can you devote yourself if you're not really convicted of who you're devoting yourself to? That person you devote yourself to has to be truly supreme, and you have to be truly convicted of that supremacy for this to actually work and be sincere and sustainable. And Prabhupada ends the purport by mentioning again, as he has so many times, this word must be heard and shared among the association of devotees. It should take place among people who are really anxious to be in Krishna consciousness. That's even more specific. Not just, oh, we're devotees, let's, casually chat about it, but among people who really want it, really are hungry for it, which is one of the qualifications for being a good student of anything. You have to really want to learn what you're studying. That's it. On to verse 2. I could say one more thing. It's just a beautiful verse, so I don't want to go too fast through it, because there's a lot of love here in this verse, and it's perhaps short-lived. In the next two verses, Krishna goes right back to I don't want to say hammering, but strongly propounding the point. But he starts this cluster with a very lovely, kind opening about how much he loves Arjuna and how he's doing this for Arjuna's benefit. Krishna, I think, might want to make clear to Arjuna and the reader, us, that it's not just a brag fest. It's not just because that's what a lot of mundane people, how they might act in such a situation. Oh, look at me, I'm so great. Duh, 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 duh. And that's not what's happening. Krishna is saying, just understand, just hear and understand. And when you accept it truly, then you can really devote yourself, which is your constitutional position anyway. You cannot help but devote yourself anyway. It might take many lifetimes, but it's a very natural process, actually. Natural and supernatural. So just try to hear how not just that he loves us and that he's doing it for our benefit, but to quote Krishna in Prabhupada's translation, it will give you great joy to hear this and accept it. It will give you joy. This is not an Abrahamic thing where it's like, do this or else eternal hell forever. Rah, 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 rah. No, just hearing itself will give you great joy. Verse 2, neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin, for in every aspect I am the source of the demigods and the sages. Oh. Sorry, y'all. I hear a ringing or buzzing in my ears. And I'm distracted by thoughts of food, which is unfortunate because it's really not that important, and a lot of sense enjoyment is involved with that. So this purport begins by referencing Brahma Samhita, Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna is the cause of all causes, specifically the cause of all demigods and sages. So what does that mean? Why is Krishna telling us specifically about demigods and sages? Maharshaya means great sages. Oh, I think it's Maharishi. Maharishaya. Great sages. And then Sura Ganaha means demigods. So many different words that can mean the same thing. But then also Krishna uses the word Devanam, of the demigods, in the next section. So why is Krishna talking about specifically the demigods and sages? Because these are very advanced souls, and if even they don't know him, who are you to start talking about, oh, I'm gonna start understanding this? You can't speculate about it. You can't philosophize about it. You can simply listen, hear, chant, and remember. Those are the first three, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Looking at my notes here. So that's the first half of the purport, which is quite long, one big paragraph. The second half of the purport is two smaller paragraphs that are about the same size in total. And here, Prabhupada goes into impersonalism a little bit. I mean, he doesn't go into it himself, but he, talks about the dangers of it a little bit. Da, 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 da. The impersonal Brahman can be conceived by persons who are already in the inferior energy of the Lord, but the personality of Godhead cannot be conceived unless one is in the transcendental position. So there are still many who think that the impersonal Brahman is the supreme. And that's not true. That's one of the main points of this chapter, the last one, and the next few chapters. The central, what is it called? Starts with tree. Triumvirate? No. Triad? I don't know. There's 3 sections of the Gita, basically. The 18 chapters you can divide into 3 sections. The middle section, forget that word. I've been studying the Trivium recently, so it's confusing with the other similar word we use for this. Tricluster. I don't know. Anyway, Krishna is much more than that. He's more than the impersonal Brahman. But how do we understand that? We understand that as devotees. And specifically, only the devotees who are fully surrendered can understand. And even then, and even for them, it is by the grace of Krishna that they know he is Krishna. I mean, the key here, though, is more towards the end here, where Prabhupada says, the devotees of the Lord do not bother about the impersonal Brahman conception. Their faith and devotion bring them to surrender immediately unto the Supreme Lord. And out of the causeless mercy, they can understand him. No one else can understand him. That last part, I think, is the key for me, because it gets more to the intention or direction in this context, in this chapter, of why Prabhupada is talking about impersonalism again, which I think is different from earlier chapters. It's less of a warning, and now we're getting more into, all right, now he's kind of like telling the reader, okay, like you're like more of a devotee now. You've made it to 9th and 10th chapters, so now it's more like you're with us, and you know how it is. It's like you know that's okay. Those speculators want to do those things they want to do, but like we know. So for us who are in the know, we're not bothered by those other things, and we're not against it either. We know, and because we know, we act on what we know, and we immediately benefit from that. On to verse 3. Very long purport here for verse 3. And then after next week, when we do verse 4 to 5, that's where all the plates, all the pictures are introduced. And there's so many. So I don't know if we can do, I don't know, I might want to go through each one of these images. They're so beautiful. I just went through them now. But I mean, like, try to maybe share them with the live stream. Anyway, we'll have to do the cluster first, though. Word comes first. Pictures are, in this case, they're supplementary primarily, but very special indeed. Verse 3, he who knows me as the unborn, as the beginningless, as the supreme Lord of all the worlds, he undiluted among men is freed from all sins. So this is a perfect closer for this first introductory verse cluster of the chapter. Krishna begins by emphasizing again what he just said. He is without a beginning, which also means he's the cause of all causes. He's the ultimate beginning of all other things, because he himself has no beginning. But then in the very end of the verse, he says, someone else who knows this, they benefit directly from knowing that, because they are delivered. Pramuchete. They are delivered, they are freed from all sins. Skipping a lot of small paragraphs in the purport. Skipping to the second one, Prabhupada mentions the word ajam, meaning unborn. And then he says, well, we already talked about this in the second chapter, and I'm not sure by reading it if it's the same ajam or not. It looks like there's a little space between the J and the A, the first A and the J, but there's no diacritical marks. So that could just be like a little printing press thing that happened. Tiny little bit of extra space there. I think it's not on purpose. So it kind of begs the question, right? Like if Krishna is unborn, is eternal, and well, we are too, then what's the difference? Well, the difference is when Krishna comes into the material world, as he did 5,000 years ago, he comes as the same unborn, but we are under the inferior material energy. So we come in a different body each time, and we're greatly affected by that body. It contaminates our consciousness, and we get really confused. We start thinking we are that body. Although at a soul level, perhaps we are also unborn in a similar way, but we are not truly unborn. Krishna is truly unborn. He was existing before the creation and is different from his creation. He is tattvically, his tattva is different entirely from the creation. It's a different tattva. We are not. We are marginal. We are part in the land, part in the sea. We are. We have these physical bodies that are very contaminated and from the conditioned energy, whatever material energy. But our spirit is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is pure. There, we do have purity, but it's up to us to realize that, awaken it, and primarily we do that by cleaning the dust, cleaning the dirt away that's covering all that purity and spirit. So there's a little paragraph. I thought it was a warning paragraph where Prabhupada says, one should not try to understand Krishna as a human being. Only a foolish person thinks him to be a human being. And this is again expressed here in a different way. Because he's not born, so a human being is born. I think when Prabhupada uses the word human being, he specifically means like Jiva Bhutam, like a created human being who comes from, born from a mother with a body like we are, which is different from Purusha, right? Like a person, a controller with a personality, and the person and human being are, I think, technically quite different as words, although we may not think of that immediately in English. But I think that is how Prabhupada is using these words here. When he says human being, he is not referring to personhood. He's referring more to like a creature with a human body, who Krishna is not. And that begs the question, all right, well, Krishna is known as the son of Devaki. How can he be born? He's the son of Devaki. And also Yashoda too, in a different sense, perhaps. Well, this is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not born as an ordinary child. He first appeared in his original form, and then he transformed himself into an ordinary child for their benefit mostly, so they could have the honor and pleasure of associating with their beloved Krishna in a way that was tolerable. I mean, tolerable in the sense that when Krishna shows Arjuna his universal form, it was not tolerable to Arjuna. It was simply not physically, viscerally tolerable, and it started to drive him mad. He said, please, Krishna, stop, come back to your more personal form. I was going to say more human form, different, more personal form. Oh, and there's a very beautiful quote here in the purport. I shared it to my Facebook. I wonder if anyone responded yet. So funny how the algorithm works. I mostly do non-Facebook, non-devotee stuff that I post on Facebook, But at the same time, the content I consume on Facebook is almost entirely devotional. That's the only reason I'm still using Facebook, to be honest. It's so funny. But the things I share are things that are typically just so funny and strange and unique and basically kind of transcendental, but maybe not devotional. So I don't have an audience. No one can keep up with my insanity, with my specific kind of insanity. I mean that in a good way, the good kind of insanity. Anyway, Prabhupada writes, the conception that there are things auspicious and inauspicious in the material world is more or less a mental concoction, because there is nothing auspicious in the material world. Everything is inauspicious because the very material mask is inauspicious. We simply imagine it to be auspicious. Simply are imagining that things are good when really, in fact, from the eternal perspective, they are not. So, oh, yeah, and the last paragraph of the purport is very important. That's when everything is really summarized nicely, but also very practically. How do we actually live? Well, we can simply read the words of the Supreme Lord in these scriptures, or we can take it from a bona fide spiritual master who is the representative of the Supreme Lord. His direction is directly the direction of the Supreme Lord. Direction, directly, direction. Some may say that's bad English because it's too redundant, but actually it's very important that that is repeated in that way. So you know it's direct. It's not indirect. It's not just like, oh, we're telling you about something and you can interpret it this way or that way. No, we're telling you directly what's happening, and you must follow it directly as well. There is no contradiction in these three sources. So the third source is also saintly persons. Assuming they are bona fide saintly persons, just like a spiritual master must be a bona fide spiritual master to be able to be a representative of the Supreme Lord, so that these three things, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, are all saying the same thing. They're all directing the same directions. And all actions done under such direction are free from the reactions of pious or impious activities of this material world. And there is an attitude of a devotee who is following these three things, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. There's typically a transcendental attitude of someone who is following along this path, which we could call in English renunciation, or in Sanskrit, sannyas. Anyone who is acting under the direction of the Supreme Lord is actually a sannyasi and a yogi, and not the man who has simply taken the dress of a sannyasi or a pseudo-yogi. So the final purport of the purport is simply follow. Simply and purely follow. And then you are a yogi, and you are naturally renounced, and you will renounce more and more naturally. But if you fake it, if you claim to be something which you are not doing it. If you receive the directions but you don't directly follow them, you're not there yet. Perhaps me too. I'm not there yet. My life is so contaminated by non-devotee things. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm a devotee, to be honest. I hope I don't claim to be either, to be honest. I've never liked that word. I never thought it was accurate for me. Never liked using that word. But at the same time, no one can deny that I'm a Vaishnav. You can try to deny it and you'll look like an idiot. Still chanting thousands of holy names every day. That's got to count for something, right? So the absolute truth is absolute. So as long as that thread is still connected, it doesn't matter how you're receiving that absolute truth, that absolute message, the absolute word. A saintly person, a spiritual master, or the scripture itself, it's all, as long as it's connected by the same thread, it's the same pearls on the thread that you're taking. However, it flows down as happenstance, so long as it is actually flowing. But for the pseudo yogis, the flow is stopped. It's not, that flow will continue with someone else, but the pseudo yogi who falls down from the thread, and all the other ones who follow that pseudo yogi, they're no longer on the actual thread of Godhead anymore. And this can be really bad when you're not on the thread, but you think you are. That's like a very unfortunate situation to be in. Many people, including Jesus, have said it's better not to be lukewarm. So if you're really not part of it, you should really step out of it. And if you're really part of it, you should really step into it. But kind of doing a lot of devotional things, but not really being into it. And also really maintaining the claim, this is part of who I am. This is not recommended. I don't think in another sense, I don't think that applies to me because I'm not fanatical at all. So when I talk with my very secular, very atheistic coworkers about vegetarianism and different semi-God consciousness things, I don't push it in their face at all. I'm not fanatical about it. And, but just the fact that I'm saying it at all, I think is better than if I just fully pretended or truly hid everything I was doing, but also even better than if I just went full on, just wear a dhoti to school every day. There's so many other ways it can happen that are worse. So I don't know. I think I'm doing the best I can given my perhaps insane circumstances. Anyway, that's definitely it for now. 33 minutes is a really good time for this first verse cluster. We will hopefully see you next week for starting with chapter 10, verse 4 in Bhagavad Gita. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Bhagavan, Jai Shri Vishnu, Jai Srila Prabhupada, author, propounder, broadcaster of the definitive English edition of Bhagavad Gita. Jai Shri Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis everywhere. Hare Krishna. See you next time. Bye-bye.